Good morning, beautiful people. It's another wonderful Sunday, whether you're here live or watching on the replay. You're just as welcome, and it's just as beautiful a day. Hope everyone's doing well. I see Cheese Free Ginger Snap and MH1953 are in the chat. Give everyone a few minutes to hop on if they can. Not a whole lot of news on my side, just what I've already said. Just more keeping on, I suppose. So, other than that, it's just been an interesting, couple of weeks. Susan Robertson, good morning. I think we are going to do. I've been thinking about it back and forth, and I think we're going to start doing communion every week starting next week. Again, you don't have to participate, but I think I've been thinking about it because I've been really thinking about it. It's like, well, if we do it to proclaim his coming and remember his suffering, that's really something we should be doing every week, every meeting together. Just something been on my mind. So, traditionally it was done, like where I came from, it was like once a month and first, and it's like, well, why not? Like, really, if that's what we're doing, why not do it every week? So, hey, Brunson. If I think there's one thing that has absolutely happened this week, though, just it's as an aside, and really should not be considered news to anybody at all. It's just that people are terrible. They just really are. But again, nothing terrible has happened to me specifically. It's just the general terribleness that is the human race. Just saying. Which is why we need God. It's why we need Christ. I mean, that's honestly the number one thing that if nothing I ever say is, hey, Ruger, if nothing I ever say comes across, please understand. If you wonder why the world is as terrible as it is, it's nothing more than the evidence that we need Jesus. I mean, that's it. In fact, there was so last night on Jessica's show, there was a comment I did not get a chance to get to. So I want to talk about that for a second. I just realized. So again, we were talking about the Nephilim last night and the UFO thing, and she, one of the things she asked, and we were sort of talking about at the very end was the whole and I've talked about this on Texas Front Porch and all that. Eisenhower, the contract with the quote unquote aliens, right? And there was a comment that said, "Oh, no one man can make can make an agreement for all of us." Yeah, he can. Like that's the big thing here. Like that people don't understand about how the way the world works when it comes to the supernatural, the spiritual. One man can, if he has that authority, make contracts that all of us are sort of spiritually obliged to, unless you're a Christian. See, that's the thing. This is one of the things we've been talking about a lot. That we talked about a lot more in the past. But as the kingdom of heaven, there's a reason Jesus called it the kingdom of heaven, because it's an actual kingdom. It is a real thing. It's not just some arbitrary phrase that he was using. It is because it is a real legal kingdom. And by doing so, you're out from underneath the spiritual authority of the people running the place here. Because remember, all the nations of the world are under, remember Deuteronomy 32, a spirit. There's a spiritual being running all of these things. And each one has their own agendas, their own thing. Well, the reason we kind of worked for a little bit was because the majority of people in this country were Christians, and they were working towards something new, and there were just at least a remnant of them that were like, no, let's do this. And so that spirit didn't really have a chance to control anything. As we became less religious, we became more and more under that spirit. We became more susceptible to it. And that's where we are. And so that was one of the big things to talk about. I didn't get a chance to really mention at the end was one of the reasons we can, the Christians don't get abducted. So yeah, I'll respond to that because that's a good question. Like this is one of those things that's really controversial, and like the ufologists don't like to talk about it. There's no recorded account of Christians who are actively participating in the church, who are actively spirit filled at that time being abducted. We have people who will go to church every, they show up for Easter, and it's the boots in the oven metaphor, right? You put your boots in the oven, you don't call them, that doesn't make them biscuits. There are people who have become Christians after being abducted because their encounters led them to become Christians and led them to become spirit filled and led them into and said, hey, I got to redo all this. Adjust this light here a little bit. There we go. So we see that where, and the abductions stop after that. We don't really have a lot of people. Now we do have stories where Christians are, again, putting themselves in situations that aren't good, right? And lead them to trouble. We don't have them where if you're just out your house, just living your life, there's no effect there. There are people who do go to church, but if you actually look into their lives a little bit, they're not really, they're culturally Christian. They aren't spiritually Christian. And it's because the church is a different it's literally a different legal organization. The legal authority from, that these spiritual beings have, to affect, like Eisenhower's contract doesn't affect us because we are under Christ. So yes, that's why, again, there are, hundreds of accounts of Christianity affecting the Christian belief, even non-Christians honestly calling out to Jesus, ending these things and becoming Christians. People using traditional Christian exorcism techniques to end these things. It's not that hard. Like the evidence, like it's there. And again, people are like, oh, well, that's just crazy nonsense. I'm sorry. Are you not the one believing that a gray dude from a ship was probing you? And I'm the crazy one who just says, look, let's just take all of these accounts, don't edit anything out, and let's see what we actually find. Again, it's the editing of the accounts that's the problem. To Rudge's question about the monsters mentioned in the Book of Giants, it was the Nephilim. The Nephilim created. So first go around was human women, right? After that, it became. I'll just say it this way: there were all of the animals of the field became, and birds of the air became sort of affected by them. So it does appear like there were Nephilim that, or again, we can call. I have no problem calling them Nephilim per se. It's just I like to be precise with language, and the thing is, most people think Nephilim, that means the giants, right? Humans and angels. So I kind of like the term monsters. Is like those were, you could argue, either Nephilim and animals or angels and animals, but there's some ambiguity there. But it's definitely a part of that creation, that weird abominable union with the Nephilim and the human women. So it all happened right at some point, and so they describe these monsters. Now again, did any of those survive the flood? Probably not. However, post flood, things happened, right? And this is one of those things where it's like, hey, we don't really know how bad things, like, we know they didn't get as bad as they were pre-flood, but we're not really certain what exactly happened post-flood. And it's possible that what we had were similar incursions that didn't go as far. What I mean is, they didn't hang around to be worshipped. They didn't hang the angels. They were like one night stands. And that's kind of what we see in a lot of mythology, right? Is they come in, it's like they would come down as something else, create offspring, and then leave, right? They weren't hanging around to be worshipped and to teach humanity things. So it seems like they're looking for the loopholes to get done what they want to get done without being forced and chained into Tartarus. So there you go. Titan says, Jason, do you suppose that that was consummation or just gene splicing technology? No idea. I think so this goes back to who knows. I mean, it, I think it's all we know. How do I say this? Okay, so when I was talking about the episode on the flat cosmology versus a flat Earth, one of the things I mentioned is we in our current modernity, with our current level of technology, think, oh, isn't this awesome? Like, we can now understand and explain things so well. So if I were to write Genesis 1 today, I'd write it completely differently. Okay, here's my problem. It's only accurate from the current understanding of the universe. It could be just as well that any explanation I would give would be just as technically wrong. See, that's the arrogance of modernity. Is we think, well, look at all of our technology, look at all the wonderful things we have. The problem is this, and someone said, I actually listened. There was a Christian on TikTok who, I ran across. He had an interesting point. And he said, the problem with all of this, science, everything, right, is and I've said something like this similarly, but he sort of described it a little different. I like the way he described it. If science has to change because as we get new technology, we get new information and new data, and we use that to modify and change our theories and understandings of the universe, and that allows us to create new technology, which then gives us new information, right? It's like, then, and the universe is full of information we don't have, then there's no reason to think that our current models and understanding of the universe are any more accurate than someone 1,000 years ago. Because all we're going to do is get more data, make new technology. That new technology gives us more data, and that data then forces us to rewrite everything, which then brings us closer to understanding something new, which gives us new technology, which gives us brand new data, which means we have to rewrite everything again. We think in our arrogance that, oh, we understand the universe now. Look at how much better we do, and no, it's just as arrogant, right? It's so when it comes to things like, well, did they, was it direct mating? Was it some kind of technology? Was it some sort of magic thing? I don't know. And anything I would speculate would be just that, speculation. And ultimately, here's the thing: it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how they did it or just that it happened, right? Again, as I think that the biggest problem we in the West have, in the modern West, is we get hung up on the technicality, not realize, and we miss the obvious. Right? It's like, well, does it matter? Ed Wallace, he's on 560 AM around here, and he's been doing a car show for decades. Every Saturday morning, I used to listen to him a lot more than I do. But he told the story once, and I've never forgot it, about how when he, in like the 70s, when he was in cars, when he got into car sales, people would come in and they would ask these questions because they wanted to show how educated they were on the, it's like, does this have a nickel iron combo, or alloy for the suspension? And so, he started answering these questions, these highly technical questions, but then he realized, okay, why don't I just turn the question around on them? And so these people started coming in. They said, does this have a nickel iron alloy for the suspension? And he'd say things like, okay, well, what percentage of nickel do you want in your suspension? You see the point? It's like we get caught up on these technicalities thinking, oh, I want this. Okay, why do you want that? Is it just because you can say that there's nickel in your alloy? Or is it because you want a smooth ride? We get caught up in so much of this. We get caught up in these technicalities. We look at the how, not the why. Again, if I gunned to my head, I think what the angels did is they took human form and they directly mated with these humans. Again, but their bodies, because they were unnatural, didn't have all the genes in the right place, which is why we got the Nephilim. That's gun to my head, my theory. Do I know that's what happened? No. They could have just been like, boom, you've got a baby now. Right? Like, we don't know the power these creatures had. Remember, these are angels. These are watcher class angels. They are, they've got all kinds of abilities and powers that we would never understand. They view the universe very differently from us. So who knows, right? The question is, did they create these Nephilim? Yeah. Does that mean they also maybe made some other things that weren't so good? Yeah. And we're dealing with that. So, Image 1953 is a great question. Does the Lord test our faith so we can go up higher? That's a great question. So I think the problem is this. It's off. Does God test our faith? Yes. However, failing God's tests never sets you back. It only allows you to grow. He tests us. And here's a better word. This is actually something I've been, you know what? I may have to do an entire episode on this. Once we're done with the Apocrypha, or I may even do like a Saturday sit down because we haven't done those in a while. You know what? Hold on. I say this all the time. Let's look into this. I'm going to pop up some Blue Letter Bible because really today's topic I can do very, very quickly. Remind me. Okay. We'll use the King James to look it up because I think that's where all that happens. Test. And a lot of how there are 0 results for the word test in the King James version. Interesting. Okay, 37 results in the New King James. Let's use that. 59 in NASB 2040. See, this is the thing is how words are often. So we'll use the New King James. Okay, so Exodus. The Lord said to Moses, "Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a certain quote every day, that I may test them whether they will walk in my way or not." Let's use that word. Let's see. That's one in. Let me put this on. Let me share the screen so y'all can watch. Chrome tab. Yes. And let me make certain y'all can see all that. I'll just pop out of the frame. Okay, so the first time we see this in the New King James is in Exodus 16:4, and that's actually a test, right? All over Exodus. Okay, Judges. Let's look at the New Testament, though. Okay, so that's a. I know what that is. Okay, so that's not. Okay, so those are not really about us. Okay. To test the Spirit of the Lord. Okay, let's see what. Each one's work will become clear, for the day will declare. You know what's interesting here? Because even Revelation 3, to test those who dwell upon the earth. I don't see anywhere where God is actually saying that he tests our faith necessarily. Because that's Paul. We're to test ourselves. We're to test all the things. Test the spirits. Fire, the day, day of the Lord kind of thing. The day will declare it because they will revealed by fire, and the fire will test. Let's look at 1 Corinthians here. That's interesting. Okay. Working for the day shall declare. Because it goes back to the King James. Shall try every man's work of what sort it is. Okay. Because it's keyed to the King James. Okay. Bam. Okay. So this word is it can Greek doki imad zo, to prove, to try, to approve, discern, allow. Okay. To test, examine, prove, scrutinize. So prove here again, this is not necessarily like this proves that's a different, again, different meaning here in English, even to see whether a thing is genuine or is not, like in metal, to recognize the genuine after examination. So yeah, I mean, it just means, so this word test is like just to see if this is what it is. Like, is this thing genuine or not? Okay. Let's go back to that first usage, because again, law of first use, right? Deuteronomy. And then what we can do is, or in Exodus, and then see if that word appears earlier than that. Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you. People shall go and gather every day, so I may prove them. Okay. So this word is nasa, or NASA, to test, to prove, to tempt, assay, put to proof or test. Okay, so again, it is to test, to try it out, to prove that something is what it is, right? Assay is used twice, like in a assayer's office, right? To see if the gold is gold, right? When's the earliest? Yeah, Genesis 22:1 is the first time this word is used. Where God came to Abraham and said, tested Abraham. He says, "I'm here." Okay, so he's there to prove him, to assay him. So okay, interesting. Okay, I'm gonna stop scaring. Okay, I'm gonna write this down. Actually, I'm gonna test. Hold on, let me text it to myself real quick. Helps if I push the right button, though. Note to self. All right, I'm gonna do some study on that. We'll do a Saturday for it, because now that I have actually stopped to, because sometimes you don't ever stop to ask questions, right? Because it was, we talked about God testing our faith. It's like, well, hold on, we just went through. I don't see a whole lot of that actually happening. Now he does test the actions of the Israelites, and let's say he still does that today. But what he's doing is, it's not a did you pass the test, meaning did you get all the right answers? It's whose side are you on, is the context, right? It's, are you going to obey me? It's testing what you already are. So I go back to my original point. If God is testing us, it's not that failure takes you further back. It's not like, well, you got to go back to remedial class. It's seeing what you really are, who you really are, who do you follow. So that still remains the same. The problem is, though, we take our own temptations, our own failures, and the work of the devil, and say, our bad decisions, oh, God's testing me. No. Sometimes things happen because you're dumb and you make bad decisions, right? Sometimes there's just, mistakes that are made. It's not God always doing it. So I think the problem is this, the question is, does it result in sin or not? I think the metaphor here, though, again, it's, it does talk about refining us, right? If you wanted to say that testing is part of refining, I think you can make that metaphor. So I'm going to do a little more study on this, but I do think that there's some clear implications that for like in a assayer's office where they're melting it down, things like that, to see what the metal's actually made of, to weigh it, to see its purity, right? So again, when it talks about, God refines us, it's the same idea. So I think these are interlocked concepts. If he's testing us, if he's proving us, what he's doing, he's seeing the metal that's there. And while he does that, he removes that slag, right? The stuff that's impure out of us. So yeah, I think he tests us. But the thing is, I think the problem is we often assume everything's a test when it's really, and again, not test. And we think of it in the sort of classical school test. Like he's saying, well, did you win? Or it's like, no, it's about seeing who you really are. So Image 1953. Yeah, there's some other comments here I'm going to come back to, but she said she had an experience this week that once it was over, strongly felt was God testing to see if she really wanted to walk in his way. And that she was happy to show that she wanted to obey him more. So I think that's probably exactly what it is, because it's what are you really? What are you trying to do here, right? It's an assessment of intent. Where's your heart really? So yeah, I mean, it absolutely happens. The problem is a lot of people think, oh, look at these bad things that are happening in my life. Well, that's not always. God doesn't have to step in to make your life miserable. Sadly, our own decisions and the fallen world we live in bring them naturally to us. Not everything's a test. Sometimes things are just what they are. But it sounds like from the context that you, again, God was doing what was giving you a test to show what, who and what you really are. What do you want? What is the call of your heart? And the thing is with that, it proves it to us too. It shows us that we should keep moving down the road that we are. Yeah. So, okay. So there was this, going again, Days of Noah. Again, like I said last night, um, it's, I think I honestly do think that, well, okay, to MH 1953's point, none of this is ever easy. Simple, yes. Easy, no. Um, I, like I said, I like precision in language, and the thing is, I think we could, when we say Nephilim, we're all talking about the giants, right? Human angel offspring. But the more I've thought about it, I think a Nephilim should be better understood as something that's not supposed to exist from a like something's been created, from a genetic standpoint. It's something that does not exist naturally. I think once you throw that little qualifier in there, it's like, okay, well then the Nephilim, or what could be considered to be a Nephilim, doesn't require it to be angel and human. It just has to be wrong. Like something that really should never, like breeding an animal, or a group of animals to create a desired effect, right? Like the certain cows that we have, or dogs. Although, yeah, I do think our breeding of dogs has been terrible overall for them in the last 100 years. Like these breeding clubs to prove eugenics. That's why they look. Every kennel club existed to prove eugenics at the turn of the last century. Please understand what they are. It was part of the eugenics movement as a way of saying, look, we've created these perfect whatever, and so we should do that with the human race. That was their purpose. That is why they were created. That's why we have these monstrosities like the pug. Look, I love pugs. Pugs are cute. They're still wonderful dogs, but they can't freaking breathe. A lot of these purebreds have some dangerous genetic abnormalities that make them prone to have their hips just like my sister had 2 Pomeranians. One of them, like one of the problems that it had was its hips would just, like the hip joint would just be like, oh, not there anymore. It would dislocate its hip just by walking. And that's apparently a big thing with some, some of these breeds, is they'll just, because they're so inbred, right? So it's like we've created these genetic conditions that are very, very bad for these poor dogs. But my point is, so I do think that we should not be doing that. We need to get things in and mix it back up a little bit. By the way, if you've ever seen a picture of like what a British bulldog looked like 100 years ago, right when we first got, like, they looked very, very different. A lot of these animals look very different than they did 100 years ago. Well, 120 years ago now because it's 2022. But my point is, like, that's breeding. I think when you step in Nephilim territory, it is you are genetically creating something that should not exist. Not fixing something, you're like some sort of genetic disease, but something where it's like, you know, it sounds cool, spider goat, right? So I think we get dangerously close to this. Again, it's like, what makes you not human? What can they do to you to make you not human? I think whatever that threshold starts becoming, when they're like, let's artificially manipulate you into something new, that's, I think we're getting I think we're getting into dangerous territory there. So back to Titan. Oh, okay. So I'll come back to Titan's comment about Paul. Did the Nephilim have a soul since they weren't created by God? Well, they did have a soul of some kind because they're the demons of today. When they die, their spirit isn't allowed to go to the land of the dead. They become the demons that we deal with, right? The that possess people. So they had a soul. They had a spirit of some kind. So I think that's one. Honestly, I think that's what a lot of the experiments are about right now with the whole UFO thing. They're trying to create bodies without native souls in them. I think that's sort of a problem, is that to create a human body is to create a living soul. So they have to find a way to create something that looks human and operates as human, but doesn't have a native soul, so that Antichrist spirit can inhabit it and run it freely without any kind of interference by the native soul. My theory, I won't die on that hill, but it's the best thought I have. Because I do think that, like, why are they continuing a lot of these experiments? Well, because they're learning things. They're trying to figure something out. I think the other problem is we often forget, there's no one drug, there's no one food, there's no one medication, there's no one anything that affects all humans equally. That may be the other thing that they're looking for, right? Is how to affect everyone. Okay, so cheese freak ginger snap. It's not that someone wants to drink goat milk with spider web in it. Is that they wanted the goat to produce the proteins found within spider milk, so they can make essentially spider thread at an industrial level to turn it into things like Kevlar, or a replacement for Kevlar is the idea, right? Because spider silk, pound for pound, is stronger than steel. Its tensile strength is it's vastly superior. So they were looking for ways to produce those. I think it's technically a polymer. I may be wrong on that. It's an organic polymer, but to create that silk in an industrial level that would allow them to then harvest it, process it, and turn it into a fabric like Kevlar to be used as body armor. That was the idea. Whether it worked or not, I honestly haven't looked that up in years. So I mean, literally like 20 years. So I couldn't tell you. But that's what they were looking for. So back to sort of the idea of testing, like to Titan's point. Yeah, I mean, the whole point of Paul talking about testing your faith was exactly what you said, right? It's to take inventory. It's to look into your own life first, right? And say, hey, am I really doing the right thing? Not am I doing the right thing? Am I doing it at the right heart? Do I want to please God, or do I just want to have pride in my own life? Think about it. How often have we run across somebody who's doing something and you're like, yeah, you're doing the right thing, but you're doing it for the wrong reasons? Look in your own heart, test yourself, and say, look, am I doing the right things? Am I doing the best? Am I living the best way? And I mean, self-evaluation is often very hard because we give ourselves excuses we will never give anyone else, right? So Yeah, it's a hard thing, but we'll do that on a Saturday. I want to look a little more into the idea of God testing us, and then of course tangentially or completely connected to that is this idea of us testing ourselves. We'll do it on a Saturday. I need to see how next Saturday looks. Cause maybe we'll do it next Saturday, or we'll do the following Saturday. I need to look at my calendar. Um, yes. So the whole resurrection of Gilgamesh. There's some question as to whether or not Gilgamesh is actually Nimrod. I don't think that he is, but the problem is Gilgamesh can also be code for Nimrod. Like this is one of those things where the problem is how language is often used. I've heard the same thing. Maybe it is Gilgamesh they're trying to bring back, but maybe it's not actually Gilgamesh. It's just that's the name given to the project, and then it's actually Nimrod. Um, or maybe it's not even any of them specifically, but just ancient. Again, it's the Antichrist spirit they're trying to bring back and give a body to. So, you know, I think we hold on to these things a little too much. I wouldn't be surprised to find out that Gilgamesh, like the story of Gilgamesh, is actually a version of Nimrod. Like the story is based on Nimrod himself. Like it's maybe an idealized version, or like they've taken inspiration from him and then created this new character so that Nimrod is. But the story of Gilgamesh states that he is, I would argue, probably Nimrod's grandson or son, one of the two. So there you go. Okay, well, I see where this day is going. Okay, so Titan says, so many cryptid stories smack of paranormal abilities. Yes, because I think that's exactly what they are. They're paranormal. Does that make them Nephilim? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Like the Dogman. I'm sorry, I just don't see the Dogman stories we have just do not make sense if they're a natural species. It just doesn't. I mean, straight up, they don't. And like you never heard, you may have heard about the Rougarou, you may have heard like Dogman in Michigan, but then like the last 10, 15 years, now we got Dogmen everywhere, you know? Um, and we got stories of Dogmen with goat legs and just, hooves. Like you just got to say, look, Occam's razor here. It's like either we got to, like, I have no problem because again, we see them. There's a history of these things being seen. There is consistency across the centuries. And it's like, okay, we have clearly organic, natural creatures running around that are cryptids. But then we have this paranormal stuff. And the problem is the paranormal stuff seems to shift itself up every once in a while. All right. That tells me it's paranormal. Does that mean Nephilim? Maybe. Does it have to be? No, it doesn't. So again, just because it's physical doesn't require it to be Nephilim. Some of these things can take physical form because they have the right to. The question is, why are they taking the form that they are? But again, so many cryptids, I think, are in that paranormal field. So, I wouldn't even call them cryptids. I reserve cryptids for naturally existing physical creatures, right? Like a dog or a human. They're just weird, right? Like pterosaurs and Mokele Mbembe and maybe these giant, the possibility of the giant beavers in Canada, stuff like that. But these other things, I don't think they're cryptids. I think they're paranormal. And I don't think the form that we're seeing them is necessarily what they really are. Now, MH1953 is a great question. I'm going to... Hey, Jim. I think this is the first time I've seen you in chat today on this channel. Good morning. Remote viewing, is it a form of witchcraft? So this is where a lot of things, and honestly, the problem is a lot of this gets, because this is, honestly, I'll say it's a broader question than just remote viewing, right? Because that's something I have asked myself a lot over the years. Is that witchcraft? I'm going to step away from that question for 1 second to take you to something I have a lot more experience in, and we'll come back to it, which is astrology. Astrology, where you look to these stars, because the stars themselves are beings that influence your life. Yeah, that's evil. That is witchcraft. That's we're not supposed to engage in that. However, astronomy, where we look to it, and yes, does God use these stars sometimes to tell us things? For again, it says it's there for signs and dates and seasons, to look at them and with wisdom and say, hey, okay, we're seeing something that matches what God has told us to look for. We can look for it. This is a thing we should be paying attention to, because he's because he's communicating to us, to the whole world, through these things. That's a different thing. And the problem is the modern church rejected that entire idea and just said everything is astrology, right? You throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's what the Pharisees did. It's, well, if this is bad, then if I set up these rules over here, I can't do this thing, right? The Talmud of the Pharisees, the rules of the scribes and the Pharisees. So in the same way, when it comes to psychic abilities, psychic phenomena, the problem is this. It is I would argue, a much more dangerous slope, right? Because you are, and like I said, I've had this conversation with Jessica myself, and we're going to have her on we're going to have this conversation, a very public conversation, where we're going to explore this in a lot of ways, because I do think it's dangerous. People have asked, is it something I should get into? I've said no, straight up. I'm not even necessarily a fan that she does it, because I do think it puts her in danger. I've said this to her, right? When you step into the paranormal, when you step into the metaphysical, you are stepping into a world into a food chain you're not at the top of. To be very direct, is remote viewing itself witchcraft? No, it is a natural ability that honestly all of us have, because we are supernatural beings. We're not just physical flesh and blood things. This isn't, we are more than this can of Melagel, right? We are supernatural beings. That does give us we have supernatural understandings. Again, something that's absolutely been observed is looking at somebody, like if you stare at them, they can feel it. That's, have you ever just been around someone, you got a weird feeling about them, or you got a weird feeling about the place? It's because we are inherently supernatural creatures. We just don't often access that we actually, particularly in the modern world, more than anything else, we deny it. We sort of we try to hide that aspect of what we are. So I think remote viewing, and again, part of the reason I think it's definitely not a form of witchcraft, because you are using your natural abilities. It's also why I think there's a lot of inconsistency with it. Again, this is nothing I haven't said to Jessica, and we're going to have an entire conversation on air, because I want it to be had. There is a reason the CIA doesn't have a giant building full of remote viewers, right? It is a real thing. It is a real phenomenon that does occur. The problem is it's very limited, because we are limited beings. Now, when you start getting into witchcraft, is the use of drugs or a medium spirit. Like, once you're talking to spirits directly, saying, I am calling upon that spirit to give me this information, that's witchcraft, because you're going beyond what you have that natural authority to do. Now, again, I've never and never will advise anyone getting into remote viewing, because I do think it makes you a target, right? It's like swimming in the ocean. Okay, go swimming in the ocean if you want. That's fine. Just do it safely, right? I mean, there's places you can go that are safe. There are ways you can do it that's safe. But it's like, if you're like, I'm going to go jump into this shark-infested water with an open cut. Okay, that sounds like a really bad idea, because obviously they're going to smell you and they're going to come get you. In the same way, once you enter that pool, you are entering into a food chain you're not at the top of. Do we have supernatural abilities by nature of us being actually supernatural beings? Yes. Yes, we do. Can they be utilized safely and effectively? That I would be way more ambiguous about. I mean, can they? Sure, theoretically. Is it Is it a preferred way of doing things? No. Personally, for me, I don't know that my evaluation of the situation is, I don't think that the benefits versus the risk is something I would do. That's me. But the second you start using drugs, the second you start trying to contact a spirit directly to get information, now you strayed into witchcraft. Again, building a fire using chemicals is not witchcraft, right? We making black powder used to be considered, alchemy, right? Within our our natural abilities, we can do things. We can manipulate the world around us, and that's within our purview to do. But everything comes with a risk. Yeah, you can make gunpowder, particularly the old-fashioned way. But if you didn't do it in a safe way, you got your hands blowed off. You do it safely, somebody else gets their hand blowed off, right? Same thing. It's one of those things where it's like, can I make black powder the old school way using saltpeter? And sure, yeah, you can. I don't recommend doing it, because mixing those things together, right? With a mortar and pestle, dyslexia there, is a good way to get something ignited. Can it be done safely? Sure. Do I recommend you do it safely? Do I recommend you do it at all? No, because there's other ways of doing it. Again, from as far as remote viewing and psychic phenomena go, it's not something I would ever advise anyone engage in, because I think it puts you, it puts you in a dangerous position, right? But again, it's not witchcraft. Witchcraft requires, drug usage and the contact of other spirits. Because really what witchcraft is, it's giving spirits access to our side of reality. That's what witchcraft really comes down to. That all the rest of it is the gilding that gives people the idea that they're in control. If I chant this thing, I get control. If I use this herb, I'm in control. If I make this sigil, I'm still in control. No, you're not. No, you're not. You are never in control. You are simply you're using your authority as a human being to give them access to you, and then through you, the rest of the world. That's all witchcraft is. All the rest of it, the song and the dance and the imagery and okay, maybe the blood sacrifices do have some effect, but all it's about is giving power to those spirits to affect the natural world, and the rest of it is just to give us these poor saps that are giving them that power illusion, like they're in control. That's all it is. So MH1953, yes. Okay, in fact, actually, this is something, again, we're going to talk to Jessica about. One of my big, again, like anything else, it's like, we sort of imagine the world to be like a mystery novel where it's like, here's the one clue that tells me everything I need to know about this event. That's how the world works, right? You have little pieces of information scattered, and you have to pull it together, and you have to see what you can see. But as you get new information, that may change the context of all the other information, right? One of the big problems I do have with remote viewing is I am not convinced. And again, we're going to have an entire conversation about this with Jessica online, so people can hear the conversation. I am not convinced that the thoughts and beliefs about a subject matter, right, can affect what they're hearing or what they are perceiving, right? I am not convinced that, to your point, that information gleaned by remote viewers can't be altered. If you're looking at a supernatural creature, I'm not convinced that you're going to be able to, that creature can't change what you get, right? Like it can't. If it can hide from our physical senses, why couldn't it deceive our physical senses? Why can't it deceive our supernatural senses as well? That is their turf, right? So, I mean, that's the entire point. Like, it's not that I see it as wholly unvaluable. I just see it as I'm not even a skeptic. I just say, hey, but the problem is I understand the weakness of it. In the same way that I understand the weakness of personal, eyewitness accounts. Like I take eyewitness accounts and I'm like, okay, I take what they say, but then I also understand that is not what actually happened, right? They're scared, they're stressed, they have their own preconceived notions. Like that colors what it is. So I have to use that and say, okay, well, here's the information I have, but what can I, be like, oh, I knew that thing was going to eat me. Okay. Does that mean it was actually planning on eating him? No. It means it's what he felt like. In the same way, remote viewing in my opinion, is very colored by perception. So it isn't like, I wouldn't be like, okay, I had a metallurgical test run and it says this thing's made of da 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 da, right? I would not consider remote viewing to be the same thing as that kind of a test. It's very much built upon perception of the person doing the remote viewing. So again, like all things, data has to be put into a box and understand its strengths and its weaknesses. That's all. And again, if I thought for a second that what Jessica was doing and other remote viewers were doing were magic, I wouldn't engage in it at all because it's magic. So yeah. Jim asks, hold on. Titan. When you find out the first time, crazy busy. Titan, I will see if I can. Yeah, crazy busy is a good way to describe me. I'll see if I can figure out a way to do that. I may even do it for because I'm going to be doing something very similar for Revelation for Sirach papers in the very near future. So I'll see if I can. I'll see if I can work that in. It may be very primitive though. What is Jim? What is praying? Well, it's coming before the throne of grace. It is sending your petition to God. Again, we are supernatural beings. If you are a Christian, you have the Holy Spirit. You are sending your petition before the King of the universe. It's nothing more complicated than that. It is uttering with your mouth from your heart, and the Holy Spirit, when we pray, oftentimes I find that I don't have the words to say, so I'll say the Our Father because he already knows what our heart is, and the Holy Spirit is translating for him. It's not it's like when it's on your heart, pray for that, ask for it, come before, it is our way of engaging with God directly, but we do it to engage with him, more directly with his heart. That's what it is. It's, if you love someone, you talk to them, you engage with them. It's nothing more complicated than that. Susan, yes, apps that talk to spirits, I would not engage in that at all. Like spirit boxes and stuff like that, I'm not a fan of. At all. I'm not a fan of, like, I know EVPs are, I mean, they're clearly a thing. I'm not a fan of actively engaging it. Like, it's one thing if you're out there and, like, say you're recording something like, hey, I just happened to get something on. Okay, then but spirit boxes specifically where you are actively looking for them to do something. No. I would argue that's very much on. Yeah, that's very much on the witch side of the equation, because we're not supposed to talk to the dead, right? We are not supposed to actively seek them out. And again, for all the reasons I said earlier, like if you're dealing with something supernatural, you don't really know what you're dealing with. If it's like, well, I'm talking to my dead aunt. You don't know that's your dead aunt, but she knew things only my dead aunt would know. No. It's you're speaking with something that has the same access to her information. I mean, straight up, that's all it is. We are never alone. That is probably it is both the most reassuring and creepiest thing I can ever say. We are never alone. The good and the bad are there, listening, watching, paying attention. And here's the thing. One of the reasons I do think like remote viewing actually is a thing, and the reason we can get feelings off of people and all this other stuff, because again, we are supernatural beings. One of the things I think we do not really understand is that what we do is real. Our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, like these things are written down. This is going to sound kind of new age, like the whole I can't even pronounce it. The acoustic field, whatever, the Akashic record or whatever, where there is sort of a record of who and what we are in the universe, right? And that is, I think that's something that these things can read. So, well, Jim, you're talking to God, not spirits. God is a spirit, but he's the chief. You don't talk to the dead. That is a distinct difference. It's like it would be the difference between a mouse and a whale. Two completely different things. So you are, again, that's the point of prayer, is to talk to God. Well, clearly we're not going to get to today's topic, so we'll do it next week. It's an interesting one though, because we're talking about the 3 wisdom books from the Apocrypha. So we will do that next week, and we will do and we'll do the communion as well. So hold on. Okay, I have a feeling. Jim, here's the problem with speaking with the dead. A, you don't know what that is. No, they're not. Spirits are not spirits. End of story. There are spiritual beings that are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim. There are spirits that were created spirits. They all have different levels. There are angels, and God is not of the same thing. God is God. God is the creator of the universe. He is not the same thing. He is beyond all of that. We can talk to God. Angels can talk to us. They have access to talk to us. However, I would argue if you're using an app to talk to an angel, or if you're using a box to talk to an angel, that's not an angel that you're talking to. They don't need those things. Things that do not belong, that do not have the proper authority to speak to you, that's not something you should be talking to. That is the dead, quote unquote. I don't think it's the dead that you're talking to. Demons, evil spirits, they will speak to you through alternative means because they don't have the right to access you directly. An angel can just pop in and be like, hey, dude, what's going on? What's up? Right? You don't have to reach out to them. Those things, if you have to use an EVP, if you have to use drugs, if you have to use a Ouija board, if you're having to use a seance, that ain't supposed to talk to you. Don't talk to strangers. The God of the universe is not a stranger. He doesn't need anyone's permission to talk to you if he wants to. No, God is species unique. Even when the word Elohim is used to refer to God specifically, it's very clear by the grammar that God is a singular thing. He is different from us in the same way that, yes, the spirits are different from us from a material sense, but he's vastly superior to them. He's not the same thing. They're not the same substance. So on that note, I will, let's keep one another in prayer. Let's remember Daniela. She's still in the hospital from her surgery. So let's keep her in mind and in prayer. And I will see y'all on Monday. Tuesdays is the new show on, I'm still forgetting it. Untold Radio AM. So 9 p.m. Central Standard. It's going to be a lot of fun. I hope y'all have a great rest of your Sunday. Y'all be good.